Do you ever catch yourself praying, Lord, keep this, you fill in the blank, from me? I hope it's not only me, but I catch myself praying, keep this sickness from my family, keep me from this trial, keep me from having to go through this scary ordeal, and on and on. In 2 Kings 6, we read about Elisha, and this passage speaks volumes to my heart. After King David died, there were many problems in the kingdom of God, and the people were disobeying the Lord. He sent them prophets or spokespeople to tell them how to obey, and one of those was Elisha. He carried God's messages to his people. At this time, the king of a neighboring country was at war with God's people. The enemy king would make plans for battle against God's people and discuss his plans with his officers. Then he would send his soldiers to the place of battle only to find that God's people weren't there. This happened because God would talk to Elisha, and Elisha would pass on the news to the king, telling him what the enemy king was going to do and where he was going to attack. Elisha would say, "Don't send your troops here." The king would obey, and over this would happen. The enemy king was angry. He gathered his officers and said, "One of you is a traitor. You are telling our plans to the enemy. Which of you is doing this?" The officers replied that none of them was the traitor. They said, "The problem is this man of God named Elisha. It's as if he's right here with us. He hears everything you're planning to do. It's like he's even beside your bed to hear what you're saying as you prepare to sleep." And then he tells his king. The king told them to find Elisha and capture him. The enemy king sent a whole army of soldiers and horses and chariots to capture Elisha. They surrounded the city. In the morning, Elisha's servant awoke and saw the city was surrounded by the soldiers and horses and chariots. He called out to Elisha, "What are we going to do?" Elisha said, "Don't worry. We have more on our side than they have on theirs." Then Elisha prayed, "God, open his eyes and let him see." The servant looked again and saw on the hillside between them and the enemy army, it was filled with horses and chariots of fire. What a sight! While they were looking, the enemy army started advancing towards them, and Elisha prayed, "God, please make them blind." And instantly they were unable to see. Then Elisha went out and said, "You've come to the wrong place. Follow me, and I will take you to where this man is that you want." So they followed Elisha, and he led them to the capital city several hours away. When they arrived, he led them right to the center of the capital. Then Elisha prayed, "God, allow them to see." God opened their eyes, and they realized they were in the middle of the capital city of their enemy. The king of God's people looked out and saw them and asked Elisha, "Should I kill them all now?" Elisha said, "Of course not. We do not kill prisoners of war. You give them something to eat and drink, and you send them home." The king prepared a great feast for the entire enemy army. After they ate, they returned to their own king, and he did not send his soldiers to battle them again, and there was peace between the two countries. It all works out perfect. God's people are protected, except I tend to cringe a bit because I read this account and think I would have much rather just avoided that battle. But if that battle had been avoided, there's a great blessing that would have been missed. I was listening to a podcast recently where a pastor shared about a dark time he had gone through battling depression. Through rest, refocusing, refueling, and therapy, God redeemed that dark time in this man's life, and he was sharing about that time. One thing that stuck out was how much closer he said he now was with God. He said he felt like he and God were now old war buddies because of what God had rescued him from. And he said he wouldn't trade that time for anything. And here I am, always trying to pray away the battle. Imagine the now increased faith of Elisha's servant. Elisha reminds him that they have more on their side. And then he prays, asking God to allow the servant's eyes to be open. And the servant sees between him and the enemy were horses and chariots of fire. God's always there in the midst of our battle, and his chariots of fire are protecting us from every battle. In closing, I'm praying he opens all of our eyes to be able to see this protection in our own lives. Blessings to you, friends.